If at least one of these 7 signs keeps showing up in your life, this is not just another video, it's a confirmation. It's not a coincidence that you're here. You felt like you don't fit in, like you're losing people, like doors you wanted are closing without explanation, and you've wondered if maybe God forgot about you. What if it were the other way around? What if all of that was the way God is quietly setting you apart for something much bigger than you can imagine? Today, I'm going to show you 7 clear signs that don't show up by accident. If you recognize them in your story, you'll understand why your life was never normal and why God hasn't stopped working with you for even a single day. Stay until the end, and if at any moment you feel that this message is speaking directly to you, remember that feeling, because it might be proof that God has already started something in you. Before I talk about the signs, I want you to think for a moment about your recent life. Not about what you show on social media, not about the mask you wear with others, but about what happens when you're alone, in silence. There are questions that chase you, nights when you stare at the ceiling and ask yourself whether everything you've been through made sense, or if you were simply just another victim of life. What you're going to hear today isn't a list of nice ideas. These are patterns that appear again and again in the stories of people who were set apart by God for something they themselves didn't even understand at the beginning. If deep inside you feel that this is about you, don't turn off this message. The first sign that God is setting you apart for something great is that deep dissatisfaction that doesn't go away. On the outside, your life might look normal. You have responsibilities, routines, people around you who tell you that you should be grateful for what you have. But inside you feel an emptiness that nothing can fill. It's not enough for you just to survive. It's not enough to work, sleep, and repeat. There's something inside you that screams that you were created for something more. You might not even know how to put it into words. You just know that a life without purpose feels heavy, like you're carrying a weight on your chest. Maybe you've tried to shut that voice down with distractions. You've filled yourself with work, with entertainment, with people, with material things. But when everything goes quiet and you're alone, that feeling comes back. You ask yourself why you can't settle like others, why you can't just live without questioning everything. That dissatisfaction isn't a flaw, it's a sign. It's as if God had placed a mark inside you, telling you that you weren't designed for an empty existence, but to leave a mark, to impact lives, to be part of something that goes beyond your own story. Long before you were born, God already knew your name, your character, your wounds, your strengths, and your weaknesses. Nothing about you surprises Him. That discomfort you feel when you try to live a normal life is evidence that your essence was created to dissolve into the crowd. It's as if your spirit refuses to be reduced to numbers, routines, and other people's expectations. When God sets someone apart, He first awakens inside that person a hunger that nothing else can satisfy. If you've felt this way for years, if you've tried to silence that calling and it's still there, you're seeing the first sign. As you listen to this, I want to invite you to do something very simple but powerful. Don't fight against that dissatisfaction. Instead, ask God what He wants to show you through it. And if up to this point you already feel like I'm describing you, don't ignore it. Later you'll understand why your story never fit into everyone else's mold. The second sign that God is setting you apart for something great is that you face battles that seem disproportionate. It's not that your life is just a little complicated. It's that, again and again, attacks, problems, and obstacles rise up that almost no one around you understands. There are seasons when everything seems to fall apart at the same time. Relationships, finances, health, mental peace. There are moments when you wonder why everything seems so easy for others while you seem to be walking uphill. The most painful part is that many times those battles come from unexpected places. People you thought would always be by your side fail you, betray you, or simply disappear. Doors you were sure would open slam shut in your face without any explanation. Plans you had carefully built collapse in a matter of days. And in the middle of all that, the question that echoes the most in your mind is, what am I doing wrong? But when God sets someone apart, the enemy doesn't just sit back and watch. The life of someone who has been set apart isn't comfortable, because their destiny is a real threat against the darkness. That's why many of the battles you've faced are not proof that God abandoned you, but rather evidence that there is something in your life the enemy wants to stop before it matures. Not every attack comes to destroy you. Some come to reveal how strong the hand is that holds you. Think about how many times you were about to give up, and yet something inside you refused to let go. There were tears, there were sleepless nights, there were thoughts you never confessed to anyone. And yet, here you are today, listening to this. That already says a lot. A person without purpose breaks and stays on the ground. A person set apart by God can fall 1,000 times, but there is always something invisible that lifts them up again. If your life has looked more like a war than a walk in the park, it's not a sign that you're worth less. It's a sign that the battle over your destiny is too big to be ignored. The third sign that God is setting you apart is that even when you make mistakes, you can't live in peace far from Him. There are moments when you drift away, when you do things you know aren't good for you, when you look for escape in paths that lead nowhere. You can distract yourself for a while. You can try to convince yourself that it doesn't matter, but sooner or later something inside you breaks. You feel a weight in your heart, an uneasiness that won't let you fully enjoy what others enjoy without thinking. Not everyone feels that. There are people who can live their whole life completely ignoring the impact of their decisions and never stop to reflect. However, when God has placed His hand on someone, that person can't be at peace in places where they shouldn't be. You can walk away, but you can't truly escape. You can try to silence that inner voice, but it doesn't go away. There is a sensitivity in your spirit that shows you when something isn't right, even if no one else sees it. Maybe you've already lived this experience. You do something you know doesn't line up with what God wants for you. And even if no one judges you, you can't stand yourself. That discomfort doesn't come to destroy you, it comes to wake you up. It's the way God reminds you that He didn't create you to lose yourself in the same things that are destroying others, but to walk a different path. If you've experienced this inner tension, if you've felt unable to stay comfortable in decisions that pull you away from God, that's one of the clearest marks that you're being set apart. At this point, I want to invite you to do something. If up to now you've already recognized at least one of these signs in your life, don't stay silent on the inside. Acknowledge it. Say in your mind, or even quietly out loud, God, if you're really speaking to me, I don't want to ignore you. That simple act of honesty is already a response. Later, when everything comes together, you'll understand why this moment was important. The fourth sign that God is setting you apart is that you've seen, again and again, how in the worst moments there is always some kind of provision that you can't explain. It doesn't mean you've never been in need or that everything has been easy. In fact, you've probably faced lack, moments when you didn't know how you were going to make it to the end of the month, situations where you felt you wouldn't be able to hold anything else together. But when you look back, you realize something. There was always a right on time. Maybe it was an unexpected opportunity, a person who showed up when you needed it the most, a door that opened when you thought all of them were closed. It might have been a word, a hug, financial help, a job you weren't expecting, or a way out you didn't see coming. In the moment, you experienced it as relief. But if you look at it calmly, you realize it was something more. It was care. It was the hand of God moving pieces you didn't even know existed. When someone is being set apart for something great, God doesn't promise them a life without problems. What He promises is that He won't leave them alone in the middle of them. Many times the provision doesn't arrive when you want it, but when it's necessary so that you don't break. God may have allowed you to reach the limit, but not to destroy you, so that you see that you're not depending only on your own strength. Every time you thought, I'm not getting out of this one, and yet you did, you were seeing that sign. Provision isn't always abundance. Sometimes it's simply a door that opens just enough for you to take one more step. The fifth sign that God is setting you apart is that you carry in your heart a burden for others that you can ignore. I'm not talking about a simple, superficial concern. It means you weren't created just to look for your own comfort, but to be an answer in the middle of someone else's chaos. You may have experienced this as rejection, and in part it hurt like that. Now look at yourself today. It doesn't mean that tomorrow everything will be resolved at once. It means that what you've lived through up to now was not wasted. That's why your process matters more than you think. If you saw yourself in these signs, write something as simple as, God is setting me apart in the comments. If you feel that this message was for you, take care of it. And if you're listening to this, maybe today was the day you needed to remember that you weren't forgotten, you were chosen. When you finish this video, don't go back to seeing yourself as just another face in the crowd. Start seeing yourself as what you really are, a person God has been setting apart, shaping and protecting. because there is something in you that you still haven't fully seen yet, but that, when it comes to light, is going to impact more than you can imagine.